I want you to imagine a piece of land, a
Um,
country, right? But it's barely the size of the U.S. state of New Jersey.
right, or like if you're looking at Central America, maybe roughly the size of Belize.
Exactly. We're talking about exactly 23,180 square kilometers of Earth. And it is incredibly arid, just scorching hot and totally devoid of, massive oil fields or...
Yeah, or endless tracts of fertile farmland. There's almost none of that.
Right. But this specific tiny piece of land, it sits squarely at the intersection of the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. So it's basically the gatekeeper to the Suez Canal.
It's right in one of the most volatile but absolutely vital shipping lanes on planet Earth. The Horn of Africa.
Yeah. And this is Djibouti.
It's essentially a geographical choke point. I mean, when you look at a standard world map, your eye might just, skip right over it.
Oh, for sure. It's tiny.
But if you look at a map of global supply chains or maritime trade routes or even international security networks, it is the center of the universe.
And we are going to look at this nation today, not through the lens of a passing news headline, but through this staggering multidimensional analysis.
Yeah, we're looking at a time span from 1960 all the way to 2023.
Right. And just to set the stage for you, our listener, we're drawing on a massive trove of data here. United Nations, World Population Prospects, World Bank Development Indicators.
It's a comprehensive 15-part academic analysis.
Yeah, it really acts like a medical chart for a country that's undergoing this intense high-speed evolution.
And what's so compelling about looking at this specific set of metrics, everything from gross domestic product to youth literacy to greenhouse gas emissions.
And governance indicators, too.
Right, exactly. What's compelling is that it tells a unified story. You really cannot understand the explosive economic growth without understanding the population boom.
Yeah, and you can't understand the environmental strain without understanding the sheer lack of physical resources. It's all just deeply interconnected.
So intertwined.
So we're going to extract that story. That's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to figure out how a single strategic coordinate on a map completely dictates economic destiny.
And how it triggers wild demographic shifts and creates this absolute pressure cooker for social governance and the environment.
Right, and we are going to look at the realities of these numbers completely impartially.
Impartially, yes. We have to look at both the undeniable, basically miraculous leaps in human development and the stark, deeply entrenched institutional bottlenecks.
The things that are holding back true prosperity. So let's start with the physical reality, because you simply cannot separate the metrics of Djibouti from its GPS coordinates.
You really can't.
We established the size, right? Roughly 23,180 square kilometers. But to understand the sheer force of the changes happening there, you have to look at the human footprint on that landmass.
Right. The population density shift is, it's basically the foundational shockwave of this entire analysis.
Okay, let's unpack this. What did the population look like in the past?
Well, if we rewind to 1960, the demographic baseline of the country was incredibly small.
How small?
There were just over 60,000 people living there.
Wait, 60,000 in the whole country?
Yeah, specifically the UN data marks it right around 60,240 individuals.
Wow. I mean, for context, that is the size of a modest suburban town in the United States.
Exactly, but spread out over an entire nation.
And then you fast forward to the present day, and that same plot of arid land is home to over 1 million people.
That's a massive boom.
Going from 60,000 to 1 million people on the exact same footprint, that's wild.
And that explosion, it requires a complete reimagining of how a society sustains itself.
Because they can't just expand outward.
Right. When a country has a small landmass, a rapidly multiplying population, and extremely arid land, which, severely limits agriculture, it cannot rely on traditional internal expansion.
Yeah, they can't just farm more land.
Exactly. A nation in this scenario cannot build an economy on farming vast tracts of land, and it cannot rely on extracting endless natural resources from the ground. They just don't have them.
So they're forced to look outward.
They are. Its entire strategic and economic value relies almost exclusively on its port and logistics advantages.
Because it functions as the maritime gateway to East Africa.
Yes, and most crucially, it serves as the primary indispensable trade route for its neighbor, Ethiopia.
Right, and Ethiopia is massive, highly populated, and entirely landlocked, so they need Djibouti.
Desperately.
So if I'm understanding the mechanics of this correctly, because of its location right there, routing traffic to and from the Suez Canal, its geography isn't just an asset.
No, it's much more than that.
Its geography is basically its primary natural resource.
Yes. Its geography dictates its entire economic structure.
Which perfectly explains the sheer violence of its economic trajectory.
Preponderance is a good word for it, yeah.
When you track the gross domestic product, the total value of everything produced, it hovers around $550 million right around the year 2000.
Right, which is quite small on a global scale.
Yeah, and it's a relatively flat, steady curve up to that point. But then the trend line just violently snaps up.
It really does.
I mean, after 2020, the GDP rockets to approximately $3.4 billion. That is a massive inflection point.
It is the profound multiple, from $500 million to over $3 billion in roughly 2 decades.
How does that even happen so fast?
Well, that year 2000 inflection point was the result of a deliberate, really aggressive strategy to monetize that geographic coordinate.
Okay.
The global economy was expanding, trade with Asia was booming, and the need for a secure, high-capacity transshipment hub in the Horn of Africa became absolutely paramount.
So they saw the opportunity and took it.
Exactly. This period aligns perfectly with a massive surge in port infrastructure development.
We're talking about, huge physical changes to the coastline, right?
Oh, yeah. We are talking about the construction of deepwater terminals, specialized container handling facilities, and these sprawling free trade zones.
Wow.
And all of it was designed specifically to attract international shipping conglomerates.
It sounds like they essentially paved their coastline to create an international loading dock.
That's a pretty accurate way to picture it.
But looking closer at the economic stability metrics, the overall GDP goes up, right? But the ride itself looks incredibly bumpy.
Yes, the growth isn't smooth at all.
The inflation metrics, specifically the GDP deflator, are wildly volatile.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Okay, so the GDP deflator measures inflation across the entire economy. And its volatility here is a classic symptom of a highly open, highly dependent economic model.
Because they're exposed to the outside world.
Exactly. Think about the physical reality we just established. They have an arid landscape and very little domestic production of goods.
Right. No farms, no big factories.
Therefore, Djibouti is deeply integrated into, and frankly, entirely reliant upon, global supply chains. They must import almost everything they consume.
When you say everything.
I mean everything. From the food on the table, to the fuel on the trucks, to the building materials, for those very ports we were just talking about.
Wait, so if they don't produce their own goods, they are completely at the mercy of global price shocks.
100%.
So if a conflict breaks out on the other side of the world and grain prices spike, the price of bread in Djibouti City skyrockets overnight.
That is the exact mechanism of imported inflation. If global bunker fuel prices jump, or if there is a disruption in global shipping lanes, Djibouti feels the economic tremor immediately.
Wow.
The volatility in their inflation metrics is a direct reflection of a country that is basically tethered to the roller coaster of the global market.
Yeah.
They just do not have a domestic buffer.
And that domestic buffer usually comes from agriculture, right? Most developing nations have a huge farming sector that provides a baseline of food security and employment.
Yeah, historically, that's the standard model.
But the industrial structure of Djibouti is one of the most bizarre profiles I have ever seen in this data. It looks absolutely nothing like a typical developing economy.
It's highly anomalous.
I mean, agriculture makes up less than 5% of the GDP. In some years, the value added by agriculture, forestry, and fishing is closer to 1 or 2%.
It is exceptionally low, and it really comes back to the physical constraints of the land.
The aridity.
Yes. The environmental conditions are categorized by extreme aridity. The arable land per capita is just a fraction of a fraction.
So they couldn't farm even if they wanted to.
Right. They lack the internal renewable freshwater resources and the soil composition required to support any sort of large-scale commercial farming.
Okay.
Because of this, the traditional economic development model simply cannot apply to them.
Right. And for you, our listener, the traditional model is usually a transition from subsistence farming, moving into light manufacturing like textiles, and eventually gradually graduating into a sophisticated service economy.
Correct. That is the standard path you see in most textbooks. But here, they essentially skipped the agrarian phase entirely.
Wow.
And they largely skipped the massive industrial manufacturing phase too, because they lack the physical space, the cheap energy, and the water required for heavy industry.
So where did they go?
They vaulted straight into a hyper-specialized service economy.
And the data shows the service sector completely dominates the balance sheet. I mean, it consistently makes up 75 to 80% of the entire economy.
It's the absolute core of their GDP.
While industry and construction trail far behind at around 10 to 15%, mostly driven by building that port infrastructure.
Exactly.
It's me think of an analogy.
Let's hear it.
It's as if the entire country essentially operates as a giant, specialized maritime toll booth and logistics campus. It's not a diversified economy. It's a massive processing center.
The toll booth economy. That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. And the trade data perfectly validates that analogy.
How so?
Well, when you break down their commercial service exports, transport services account for over 80% of the total.
Over 80% just on transport.
Yes. They are not selling physical goods. They are selling the service of moving things, storing things, processing customs, and refueling ships.
Which means they have a massive trade deficit in actual physical goods.
Right. They import food, clothing, electronics, cars.
And to pay for all of those imported physical items, they entirely rely on selling these transport services.
And attracting foreign capital.
Right. Because beyond just moving boxes, they have to attract foreign money to build the toll booths in the first place.
Exactly. And this is where foreign direct investment, or FDI, becomes the lifeblood of the nation. The net inflows of FDI jumped significantly after 2010.
And where did that money go?
Well, this capital didn't flow into domestic factories. It flowed into expanding the port infrastructure and building massive new connectivity projects.
Like what?
Like the electrified railway, linking Djibouti directly to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia.
Okay. That makes sense.
Furthermore, they leveraged their strategic geography by hosting military bases for multiple foreign nations.
Which is, I guess, a highly unique form of foreign investment and rent generation.
It really is. They balance their books by monetizing their location to attract foreign capital, selling logistics services to global shipping lines, and using that revenue to import the necessities of life.
Okay, so we have established the map and the money. We have a tiny, arid, strategically vital piece of land that went from a 550 million economy to a 3.4 billion economy, mostly by acting as the ultimate global middleman.
That's a good summary.
But, and this is a big but, a hyper-specialized logistics campus requires a workforce.
It does.
You need people to operate the gantry cranes, manage the complex custom software, run the rail lines, and basically facilitate this international trade.
Right.
Which brings us to what I think is the most dramatic shift in the entire analysis, the transformation of the Djiboutian people themselves.
Yes. We are moving from macroeconomic spreadsheets to actual human lives now. And the demographic transformation over the last few decades is profound. It basically dictates everything about the country's future.
Okay, let's look at the population pyramid. The way demographers map out the age of a country.
It shows a fascinating way.
It really does. Historically, the 0 to 14 age group made up a massive portion of the population. It was sitting at over 45% at its peak.
It was quite literally a country of children.
Yeah. But recently, that youngest cohort has slowly declined to about 29% today. Meanwhile, the working-age population, people aged 15 to 64, is steadily climbing and is currently nearing 66% of the total population.
And this mathematical shift introduces a crucial concept in developmental economics. It's known as the age dependency ratio.
Okay, break that down for us. What is the age dependency ratio?
This metric measures the ratio of dependents, meaning people who are generally too young or too old to work, typically those younger than 15 or older than 64,
Right.
compared to the working-age population.
So it's basically a measure of how many people the average worker has to financially carry on their back.
Exactly. It measures the societal burden of care. And if we look back to the 1990s, Djibouti had an age dependency ratio of roughly 93.3%.
That is staggering.
It's incredibly high.
So for every 100 working-age adults, there were 93 dependents to feed, clothe, educate, and care for.
It is a crushing economic reality.
I can imagine.
In a society with a dependency ratio that high, a huge portion of whatever wealth the working adults generate is immediately consumed just for basic day-to-day survival and caretaking.
Right, because kids and the elderly need resources but aren't generating income.
Precisely. So there's virtually no surplus wealth left over for household savings, for investing in a business, or for capital accumulation. The economy is perpetually running on a treadmill just to keep its population alive.
But the recent metrics show that ratio has plummeted. It's down to around 60%.
And what's fascinating here is that drop is the catalyst for potential transformation.
Okay, how so?
When the dependency ratio falls significantly, economists say the demographic dividend window has officially opened. The math has flipped in your favor.
So you now have significantly more hands to work than mouths to feed.
Exactly. You have a massive cohort of young adults entering their prime productive years, while the aggregate burden of child-rearing has relatively lessened. This is the prime theoretical window for rapid exponential economic acceleration.
But, and this is crucial, to get to that dividend, the population had to undergo a massive public health revolution.
Absolutely.
You don't just magically get a massive cohort of healthy working-age adults without fundamentally changing the baseline of human survival.
No, you have to earn that dividend through health interventions.
And the UN development metrics on life and health in this report are truly incredible victories. Let's look at life expectancy.
Yeah.
In 1960, the total life expectancy at birth was just 43.4 years.
Which is barely in the middle age.
Yeah. But today, it has jumped to roughly 66 years. They added more than 2 decades of life to the average person.
It is a monumental achievement in public health, and it forms the bedrock of this demographic shift.
How does living longer change the demographics, besides the obvious?
Well, as life expectancy rose, the societal behavior around family planning began to change. The crude birth rate halved.
Really? Halved?
Yes, dropping from 46.9 per 1,000 people down to about 20.7.
Wow.
And the total fertility rate, which measures the average number of children born to a woman over her lifetime, dropped from over 6 children historically to about 2.6 today.
Which perfectly explains the shrinking base of the population pyramid we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Families are having fewer children.
But crucially, the children they do have are surviving. Which brings me to what I consider the absolute most important victory in the entire analysis.
The child mortality rates.
Yes, the plunge in child mortality.
The mortality rate for children under 5 dropped from over 130 per 1,000 live births in the 1960s down to about 52 today.
That is a massive drop. I mean, think about the reality of that 1960 number. More than 1 in 10 children did not make it to their 5th birthday. The psychological and economic toll of that on a society is just unimaginable.
It really is. And the drop from 130 to 52, it's the result of dedicated structural public health interventions. It isn't magic.
What kind of interventions?
It is the physical rollout of rising measles immunizations, expanded access to basic healthcare facilities, and a really critical increase in the percentage of births attended by skilled health personnel.
So having an actual doctor or midwife there makes a huge difference.
A massive difference. And when parents no longer have to anticipate the tragic loss of multiple infants, they begin to invest more concentrated resources, both time and money, into the education and development of the children they do have.
Ah, so it changes the entire parenting strategy.
Exactly. You transition from a strategy of basic survival to a strategy of human capital formation.
And the education metrics reflect exactly that. I mean, these surviving children are going to school in unprecedented numbers.
The leap in human capital is vast.
Give me the numbers on that.
In the 1970s, the gross primary school enrollment rate was hovering around 20%.
So only a tiny fraction of the population was getting even a foundational education.
Right. But fast forward to the recent data, and the youth literacy rate, specifically for that crucial 15 to 24-year-old bracket entering the workforce, is nearly 79.5%.
That is a huge leap. Almost 80% of the youth can read and write.
And it isn't just a volume increase either. It's a structural leveling of the playing field.
You're talking about the gender gap.
Yes. The Gender Parity Index, or GPI, for primary enrollment, measures the ratio of girls to boys in the classroom. Recently, that index has approached 1.0.
Which means?
Which signifies that basic educational access at the primary level is essentially balanced.
So girls and boys are equally likely to be in primary school now.
Exactly. The historical systemic gap, where boys were vastly more likely to attend primary school than girls, has essentially been closed at that foundational level.
Okay, wait, hold on. I have to interject here with some genuine skepticism.
Sure, go ahead.
We are celebrating these dropping dependency ratios, right? The rising literacy rates, the fact that kids are surviving and girls have equal access to primary classroom.
The data looks very positive there.
It sounds like an absolute triumph of development on paper. And this is a big but if they are essentially living on a massive arid toll booth, with absolutely no agriculture to fall back on.
I see where you're going with this.
Where are all these newly educated kids actually supposed to work?
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a huge sudden influx of young, literate people entering the workforce all at once, the demographic dividend is only a dividend if they are actually getting paid.
Correct.
If they don't have jobs, doesn't this dividend turn into a massive societal liability?
Your skepticism is entirely warranted.
Yeah.
And it pinpoints the central tension of Djibouti's current reality.
Because you can't just be educated and unemployed forever.
No, you can't. And this is exactly where the demographic triumphs collide with the physical and economic constraints of the country.
The bottleneck.
Exactly. This collision creates a massive systemic bottleneck. The World Bank data reveals severe structural friction here.
Okay, let's transition from the human capital to the actual physical and economic reality these young people inherit.
We have this generation of healthy, literate young people ready to contribute. But when they step out of the classroom, the reality they step into is highly fractured.
Let's talk about that fracture, because there's a specific data point here, the infrastructure paradox, that perfectly illustrates it.
The digital versus physical divide.
Yes. On one hand, there is a wild digital explosion post-2010. Mobile cellular subscriptions just go completely off the charts. The country connects to the global digital grid.
Very rapidly.
And impressively, female internet users make up 51.6% of the online population.
So young women are highly educated and digitally connected.
Right. But then you look at the physical ground they walk on. While they can access the sum of human knowledge on a smartphone, only about 67% of the entire population has access to basic drinking water services.
It is the ultimate manifestation of unbalanced development.
It's crazy. You're online, but you don't have reliable tap water.
You have the hypermodern digital infrastructure of a globalized service economy layered over a physical environment that is severely lagging.
And it's not just water, right? The sanitation data is pretty stark.
Yes, there is a massive chasm in basic sanitation coverage between urban and rural areas. The urban center, clustered around the capital and the port facilities, has significantly higher coverage.
While the rural areas...
The rural, more nomadic areas are deeply underserved.
So you have a youth cohort scrolling through the globalized internet while physically rationing basic water in some areas. That is a recipe for intense frustration.
Absolutely.
But let's get back to the core question. What happens when these digitally connected, literate young people log off the internet and go looking for a paycheck?
They hit a wall of structural youth unemployment.
Even with the massive GDP growth.
Yes. The economy, despite its high GDP growth driven by the port, simply is not generating enough varied entry-level jobs to absorb the sheer volume of young people flooding into the labor force.
So the economy is growing, but it's not creating jobs that fit the population.
Right. The unemployment is particularly severe among those with lower education levels, but it creates a massive downward pressure on the entire youth cohort.
And here is where it gets really interesting and honestly super frustrating. We just established that girls achieve parity in the primary classroom, right?
Yes, the GPI is near 1.0.
And we established they make up 51.6% of the online population.
Correct.
Yet, despite this high level of education and digital connectivity, the female labor force participation rate remains drastically lower than the male rate.
It's a massive contradiction.
Why? If they are educated and online, why are they structurally boxed out of the economy?
To understand why women are excluded, you have to look at the exact nature of the jobs being created.
Okay.
Remember the bizarre industrial structure we talked about?
Right. Less than 5% agriculture, mostly services.
Exactly. Agriculture provides less than 2% of the actual jobs. And there is virtually no light manufacturing.
Meaning no textile mills or electronics assembly plants.
Right. And historically, in other developing nations, those light manufacturing jobs provide massive entry-level employment for women.
Oh, I see. But Djibouti doesn't have those factories.
No. Instead, the service sector is the absolute lifeblood of employment.
But wait, usually a service economy is good for female employment, isn't it? Like retail, hospitality, office work.
Generally, yes. But in Djibouti, services largely translates to formal logistics, heavy transport, stevedoring, and 247 port operations.
Oh.
These are industries that are deeply historically male-dominated. The physical nature of port labor, The shift work and the cultural barriers within the heavy transport sector create a massive structural barrier for women.
So if a young woman graduates high school there is no farm to work on, there are no light manufacturing factories to get an entry-level job in, and the formal service sector is dominated by male-heavy port logistics.
Precisely.
That's incredibly limiting.
It is. And in many developing nations, when the formal sector cannot absorb a surge of young workers, agriculture acts as an informal sponge.
Like people go back to the family farm to help out.
Right, they return to family farms to at least secure a basic livelihood and food security.
But Djibouti completely lacks that agricultural safety net.
You do. If you do not secure a job in the formal or informal urban service economy, you're simply unemployed. There is no farm to go back to.
This brings an analogy to mind. The demographic dividend in this scenario feels like dropping a massive, high-performance engine into a car, but completely forgetting to connect the transmission.
That is an incredibly accurate mechanical analogy.
You have all this raw, youthful energy, this hard-won education, and this intense desire to move forward burning incredibly hot. But because there isn't a diverse job market to act as the transmission, there's just no forward motion.
And all an engine does when it runs at high speed without a transmission is generate intense heat and friction.
Wow.
That heat is youth unemployment. And that friction leads us directly to the immense pressures on the environment and the state's institutions.
Which is the perfect transition to the next part of this analysis. Because cramming a rapidly modernizing, digitally aware, highly ambitious population around a single major strategic port creates intense pressure.
A pressure cooker, as you said earlier.
Exactly. You have high youth unemployment, a severe lack of basic water for a third of the country, and a total reliance on the global supply chain for survival. Let's examine how the environment and the government are handling, or maybe buckling, under this specific strain.
Let's start with the environmental footprint. The constraints here are severe.
The World Bank tracks something called renewable internal freshwater resources per capita. And for Djibouti, the data categorizes it as extreme scarcity.
Yes. They physically do not have the internal water resources to support this massive population boom comfortably, let alone support large-scale industrial expansion.
And while the physical resources like water are scarce, the environmental pollutants generated by the toll booth economy are rising dramatically.
Right. The data shows total greenhouse gas emissions climbed steadily, from roughly zero point 0.9 megatons of CO2 equivalent in 1990 to approximately 2.41 megatons recently.
I mean, 2.41 megatons is a relatively small absolute number on a global scale, right, compared to, like, the US or China.
True. But domestically, it represents a nearly threefold increase within their borders.
Ah.
And that tracks exactly alongside the expansion of the port and the population.
But the environmental metric that really forces you to pause, the one that is immediately dangerous, is the air quality data.
The particulate matter.
Yes, the analysis tracks PM 2.5 air pollution. And for you listening, if you aren't familiar, PM 2.5 refers to particulate matter that is so microscopic, less than 2.5 microns in width, that it easily bypasses your body's natural respiratory defenses.
It's invisible to the naked eye.
Right. When you breathe it in, it doesn't just irritate your throat. It gets deep into your lungs and can even enter your bloodstream.
Which is why the World Health Organization sets very strict safety guidelines for it. Long-term exposure leads to severe cardiovascular and respiratory diseases.
And in Djibouti, the PM 2.5 mean annual exposure consistently sits above 35 micrograms per cubic meter.
Which vastly exceeds the WHO safety standards.
Vastly. The population is living in an environment of chronic, dangerous air pollution.
And we must connect the cause to the effect here.
It's not because they have a bunch of coal power plants, right? Because they don't have heavy industry.
Exactly. This air pollution is the direct physical byproduct of the toll booth economy.
Explain that.
Think about the logistics required to act as the gateway for Ethiopia. You have thousands of heavy-duty diesel trucks idling at the port, constantly moving cargo inland.
Right, all those diesel fumes.
Plus, you have massive international container ships burning bunker fuel right off the coastline.
Bunker fuel is like the thick, unrefined stuff at the bottom of the barrel, right?
Exactly. It's some of the most particulate heavy fuel in existence. Combine those intense localized emissions from the ships and trucks with the naturally occurring dust of an extreme desert environment, and you get persistent, hazardous air quality.
So it is quite literally the physical cost of doing business in global logistics.
Paid for by the respiratory health of the local population.
That is brutal. So the environment is absorbing incredible strain. The air is polluted by the trucks. The water is naturally scarce. What about the institutions?
The governance side of the equation.
Yeah, how does a government manage a society running at this hyper-accelerated speed? Dealing with thousands of unemployed, educated youth and billions of dollars in foreign investment flowing through a single port.
To understand this, the academic report utilizes a very specific standardized data set. The Worldwide Governance Indicators, or WGI, produced by the World Bank.
Okay, the WGI.
Yes. And the WGI is a vital tool for economists because it attempts to quantify the quality of a nation's institutions.
Right, and we should emphasize that we are examining these metrics impartially. The data doesn't assign moral blame. It simply measures the administrative reality on the ground across several dimensions.
Precisely. Let's look at 3 critical WGI metrics for Djibouti. First is government effectiveness.
What exactly does that measure?
It captures perceptions of the quality of public services, the competence of the civil service, and the quality of policy formulation and implementation.
So how well the government actually gets things done.
Yes. The scale roughly goes from -2.5 to +2.5. And over the long term, the estimate for Djibouti has remained persistently negative,
Where is it sitting?
hovering largely around -1.0, though there are minor fluctuations depending on the year.
A persistent negative 1.0. Okay. What about the integrity of the system?
The next indicator is control of corruption. This measures the extent to which public power is exercised for private gain, including both petty and grand forms of corruption.
And what does the data show there?
In this dimension, the data shows Djibouti generally oscillating in the 20th to 40th percentile rank globally.
So meaning that 60 to 80% of countries globally rank higher in effectively controlling corruption.
Correct. And the final piece we'll highlight is rule of law.
Okay.
This measures the confidence that agents have in the rules of society, including the quality of contract enforcement, property rights, the police, and the courts.
And how do they rank there?
Here, too, the ranking is relatively low, reflecting long-term institutional challenges in establishing a robust, predictable legal framework.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, I want to make sure we don't just treat these as abstract academic rates.
They aren't abstract at all.
Right. If I'm a young, unemployed person in Djibouti City, or even if I'm an international investor looking at a spreadsheet, how do these WGI metrics actually manifest in reality?
They manifest as institutional friction. These governance metrics are the exact friction points that dictate whether macroeconomic wealth translates into human development.
Give me an example of how that works.
Okay, imagine a massive foreign direct investment deal comes in to expand a shipping terminal. The money flows, the GDP goes up.
Great.
But does the tax revenue from that expansion efficiently pass through the bureaucracy to build a water desalination plant for the rural areas? Do the customs revenues fund advanced vocational training programs so local youth can operate the new digital logistics software rather than importing foreign labor?
I mean, when government effectiveness is hovering at negative 1.0 and rule of law is low, the answer is usually no, or at least it's very slow.
Right, that process is highly inefficient. The bureaucracy struggles to translate the billions of dollars at the port into functioning plumbing, reliable electricity, and dynamic job creation in the city.
It feels like they were trying to build a massive hyper-modern skyscraper on a very narrow foundation.
That's a great visual.
The port and the internet connectivity are the shiny penthouse. But the plumbing, the water, the governance metrics, the social safety nets is under incredible strain.
The government is the bridge between the wealth of the toll booth and the well-being of the citizens. And right now, the WGI data suggests that bridge is severely bottlenecked.
And we can see the absolute human cost of that bottleneck when we look at the social equity data on page 14 of the report. What is the financial reality for the everyday citizen who isn't profiting directly from the port?
The data shows that foundational poverty persists.
The poverty gap at the $3.65 a day threshold, which, for context, is the World Bank's standard poverty line for lower middle-income countries, remains a persistent reality.
It does. Furthermore, when we look at the Gini coefficient,
which is the standard mathematical measure of income inequality within a nation, right?
Yes, it reflects a society with moderate income inequality. It isn't the most vastly unequal society on the planet, but there is a stark, highly visible divide.
A divide between who?
Between the highly capitalized wealth generated at the top echelons of the logistics sector and the reality of the unemployed youth at the bottom.
And crucially, the data clearly states that social insurance coverage has a massive amount of room for improvement.
Yes.
The safety nets designed to catch citizens when they fall ill, lose a job, or simply get old are not comprehensive enough to protect the vulnerable.
And remember the structural reality we established earlier.
About the lack of farms.
Exactly. When a society has absolutely no agricultural sector to act as an informal safety net, the state's formal social insurance programs become infinitely more critical.
Right, because you can't just grow your own food if you lose your job.
Exactly. If you fall out of the urban economy in Djibouti, there is nowhere soft to land.
Man, we have covered a massive amount of ground here today.
It's a dense data set for sure.
I mean, we've walked through over 60 years of intense data, from the expansion of a tiny arid footprint to a population of over 1 million. We've seen the GDP explode from 550 million to over 3.4 billion through the creation of this hyper-specialized toll booth economy.
Right.
We've seen the miraculous drop in child mortality and the surge in youth literacy, creating this massive demographic wave of young people.
The opening of the demographic dividend window.
Yes, and we've seen how the lack of diverse jobs, severe water scarcity, environmental pollution, and institutional friction are creating intense pressure.
The bottleneck.
So what does this all mean, synthesizing all of this? What is the conclusion of this multidimensional analysis? How does a country navigate out of this specific pressure cooker?
Well, the academic report synthesizes the path forward by demanding a pivot. A pivot from merely holding a mathematical demographic advantage to executing a structural transformation.
Because right now, they just have the raw numbers.
Exactly. The core strengths are undeniable, right? Djibouti has successfully monetized an irreplaceable strategic location. They are deeply integrated into global trade, and they've achieved massive generational gains in basic health and primary education.
But the challenges are steep.
Very steep. The extreme water scarcity, the hazardous air quality, and the high institutional friction are incredibly difficult barriers.
So how do they connect the transmission to the engine? How do they turn the youth boom from a liability into actual qualitative economic transformation?
The report outlines 3 critical pillars for the future.
Okay, what's pillar number 1?
First, aggressive, targeted investment in advanced human capital. Basic literacy and primary education are fantastic, but they're no longer enough.
They need specific skills.
Right. The government must focus on advanced vocational and technical training. If the economy is entirely based on global logistics, the local youth need the advanced skills to operate complex supply chain software, manage automated port machinery, and navigate international customs law.
So they aren't just moving boxes, they're managing the global flow.
Exactly. What is pillar number 2? Second, they must utilize their digital connectivity to leapfrog traditional industrial phases.
Like skipping the factory phase entirely.
Right. We established they cannot build massive, water-intensive manufacturing plants, but they have high internet penetration. They need to pivot toward building digital services, tech hubs, and knowledge-based economies that don't rely on massive physical resources.
That makes total sense. And the third pillar?
The third pillar has to be fixing the bridge, improving the WGI metrics.
The governance environment.
Exactly. Fundamentally improving the institutional environment. If you want to attract diverse foreign investors who want to build water desalination grids, renewable energy infrastructure, or tech campuses, rather than just investors looking to park a cargo ship.
You have to prove you can handle it.
Right. You must have a predictable, efficient, and transparent institutional environment. They have to raise that government effectiveness score and strengthen the rule of law to ensure foreign capital feels secure integrating into the broader domestic economy.
It sounds like a race against time.
It really is. They are at a critical transition point. They are trying to move from just having a demographic dividend on a spreadsheet to achieving true qualitative economic transformation for their citizens.
This has been a profoundly fascinating journey through the vital signs of a nation. It really has.
The data tells quite a story.
It does.
Right.
And it leaves me with a final provocative thought that I want to pass directly on to you, our listener.
Let's hear it.
We started this deep dive by stating that a nation's geography is its destiny.
Right.
And for decades, that has been absolutely true for Djibouti. Their location completely dictated their reliance on the port. But after looking at the digital connectivity, the massive youth boom, and the hard-won leaps in education, I have to ask, how much can a young, eager, digitally connected population rewrite that geographic destiny?
It's the ultimate question.
When a country has almost zero agriculture to fall back on, they are entirely at the mercy of the global grid. They act as a crucial, specialized node in the vast network of global trade. So think about that the next time you order something online and track a package moving through the global supply chain.
Yeah.
When you see that tracking update flash in transit across your screen, remember the human reality behind it. Chances are the success of that shipment and the stability of the global prices you pay for your everyday goods are deeply, inextricably intertwined with the governance metrics, the water scarcity, and the ambitious hopes of the unemployed youth of a tiny, incredibly vital nation in the Horn of Africa.